I was reading the instructions, and it says, the peg head of the MT10 has been left specifically slightly oversized, and here is a chance to express your individuality and make a mandolin that is truly your own design. Man, Saga has no idea what's about to hit him.
So last spring, I found a very strange Craigslist post in rural New York that was this man just cleaning out his shed and getting rid of his lifetime supply of wood. And he was a duck carver. His grandkids didn't want any ducks anymore. And so it was take it all or leave it for a very low price. And so I took it all and didn't know what to do with all of the butternut. Like, I got some other great pieces of wood out of it, but I brought this up at the Catskills Maker Camp this fall, and a bunch of makers were like, well, we've never worked with butternut before, but we'll definitely try if you mail us a piece. So I am going to be literally writing the addresses on each of these pieces of wood, slapping a stamp on it, and seeing how many of them get there. Let's do it.
With my really rough sawn wood, I'm gonna first run it on the joiner and then the planer so I get something a little bit more manageable. Then my next step is to measure the halfway point and then cut it in half. Now, I made a massive mistake here where I didn't run it on the table saw first, and I don't know why. Instead, I decided to run that entire block of wood on the bandsaw, and as you can see, it starts smoking. It vaguely catches on fire, and my line was straight 3/4 of the way and then veered off to the side, and once it had veered off, there was no saving it. So as a result, one of my pieces was a lot thicker than the other, and I had to plane them both down a good amount and lost a lot of thickness. And worse than that, I lost the perfect match of grain when I planed it down. But what can you do? You make mistakes and you learn from them. Also, if you ever find yourself in this situation where you're planing down a piece that's a lot higher on one side than the other so it doesn't auto-feed, use a push stick. Don't stick your hand in a planer, no matter how thick the wood seems. Just don't stick your hand in machinery. Okay, get off my soapbox and glue up this piece now. Now that I had a mandolin body ready to be CNC'd, it was time to actually design what I was CNCing. And as you can see, I went through a ton of different ideas and iterations and just doodled around. And I used the app Adobe Fresco and Adobe Draw on my iPad because this can export vectors directly to Adobe Illustrator, which I can then turn into DXFs and run on the Shopify. So here's a little peek into my creative process. Once I landed on a design that I liked that was duck-themed enough for this butternut challenge and its history and origins, it was time to run it on the CNC. And at this point, two terrible things happened, perhaps as karmic retribution for entrusting my job to robots. The first one being that the CNC lost its homing and took a massive chunk straight out of the middle of the butternut. And that gouge is where the tone knobs lines are supposed to be. And the second being that the camera ran out of battery and shut off and missed the whole thing. I'm so sorry. So I ran a new CNC job to carve paths for the tone knobs outside of this gouge and was sort of back to the drawing board because I now have to design a new pickguard that could cover that massive mistake. Next, I just cut the outline out on the bandsaw because the 1/4-inch blade of the ShopBot can't go all the way through this big slab of wood. Then I went over to the router table to take off that lip, and disaster number 3 of this project struck. I've watched this footage over a bunch of times, and my best guess is that when I hit the bit, I was going the wrong way around that bend, and so instead of running against the grain, I was running with it. Regardless, it took out a ton of grain. Here's it in slow-mo. The rest of the routing was fairly uneventful. I was really careful and still got a good amount of tear out. It turns out butternut is a pretty stringy wood to be working with, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty glad I mailed most of it out to my friends. Then I cleaned up what I could on the disc and spindle sander, and then to get those teeny little inside corners of the wing feather tip things, I used a little baby 1/4-inch router bit, which was super nerve-wracking, especially after the tear out I had earlier, but it went okay. Next, I had to go in and fill in all these tear out gaps and cracks with epoxy. So I used an epoxy wood flour mixture. Alright.
I don't even know if this is gonna work.
No, that was a lot. I let one of my really exuberant friends go get some of the wood flour from the sander, and he pretty much grabbed wood chips. So it didn't work as well as it could have. But that's okay, because we had fun in the process. I quickly scraped, planed, and sanded that back down to its original shape, and we were off to inlay. I won some mother of pearl inlay from Imagine Lay from the wood turning challenge a few years ago, and I figured this would be a really good project to put it to use. I watched a couple of videos on how to do pearl inlay, and the two most common methods seem to be mix it with epoxy and pour it into your crack and then CA glue over it. And since I didn't have any CA glue accelerator yet, I decided to go with epoxy. Plus, I could fill in tear out from the CNC like this one while I was at it. Once that was done drying, I ran it through the planer and found a bunch of air bubbles. So I filled them with CA glue, then quickly spritzed them with CA glue accelerators, so I was pretty much ready to rumble instantly. Next, I just had to drill the hole for the output jack, and that connects back into the internal cavity. And then it was time to get sanding. I sanded the front and the back and the sides up to 220, and getting into those little crevices under the wings was really tricky. I ended up taking adhesive sandpaper, wrapping it around small screwdrivers, and then sort of hand sanding. For finish, I used a beeswax wood polish for a more natural look because I really wanted to contrast with the really shiny acrylic of the pickguard. Then it was time to laser cut my redesigned pickguard, and as you can see over on the right, it took me a couple tries to get it right, and this was the last one that could possibly fit on my piece of acrylic.
Alright.
And with the body pretty much done, it was time to move on to the neck. So I decided to cut the headstock into something I thought matched the body a little bit better, so I picked this sort of flamey, swirly wing design shape thing. I don't know. It just seemed like it matched. So I cut it out on the bandsaw and then I sanded it. This next part was making me nervous for the entire project. I had to somehow magically transfer Saga's completely random hole pattern and neck shape over to my custom mandolin. This made me so nervous, I even emailed Saga multiple times asking for any kinds of drawings or even CNC files, anything, like numbers, mechanical drawings, something to help make sure that when I mounted the neck, it would be straight. And of course, they didn't respond to any of my emails, so I made a cardboard laser cut piece of the inside of the neck, and that was both a test for my cutout on the CNC of my piece, but also I used it to transfer the holes over to my final piece. And I was really close, but I wasn't 100% right, and as a result, the intonation of the final mandolin is a little bit off on the lower strings. And now it's time to install all of the hardware. Now, I could go through this step by step, but honestly, I don't recommend any of you ever get this kit. It was poor quality, really difficult to work with, and they made no steps to making your own body any easier. As a super brief synopsis though, step 1 is peeling the protective film off of the pickguard, which is perhaps the most satisfying part of the entire project. So shiny, shiny, shiny. Next, I pulled all of the existing hardware off of their pickguard and unscrewed it, then transferred it delicately over to mine. Now, this kit does come pre-soldered, so if you were just buying the kit and then putting the 4 screws in to put it together, it might be okay. I connected the handful of wires as per the instructions on the kit, and then wired it up, closed it up, screwed it down, and strung her up. This is actually the second time I'm doing it, because the first time I did this, I plugged it in and it didn't work. And when I opened it up, all of the electronic joints were bad, so I had to resolder them. So this is take 2.
Alright, moment of truth. I popped the E string while restringing it, so now it's a 3-stringed mandolin. So let's see how we do. The first time I did this, it didn't work. That's why I'm so nervous. Alright, let's turn this volume down. Well, it mandolins. Anyway, I'm really tired and I'm leaving tomorrow morning to drive 10 hours to Vermont to my uncle's wood shop, and I've never built anything with him before, but we are going to spend the entire month of February building a canoe. So be sure to stay tuned, because that's going to be an absolutely wild ride. I'm going to be videotaping the whole thing, of course. It'll probably come out in a series of videos. If you're interested, definitely hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell, and then you'll get to see this real-time journey of me building my first boat. Be sure to check out all of the other videos, and I'll probably make a playlist and link it down in the description below. And if I didn't do that by the time you're watching this video, leave a comment and be like, Zala, make a playlist! Because the world needs to see all of the butternut.